Greetings, chess players. My name is Chris Torres. This is Daily Chess Musings. Today's date is July 1st, 2025. And I am honored. I've spent a large portion of my life studying Capablanca. He's one of my favorite chess players. And today I am honored to share with you some of what I have learned from his chess. Today's game is an interesting one. It is Capablanca before he became a world champion, because it's 1911. And you learned a lot about Capablanca in the Capablanca Tartakower video earlier today. And Capablanca will be playing Arnold van Foreest. So let me go ahead and pull up their pictures, make sure that works. There they are. Jose Raul Capablanca is on the bottom because he'll be playing the white pieces. And Arnold van Foreest is up top. Now, for some of you, that might ring a bell. Van Foreest. Why have I heard that before? Well, Lucas and Jorden van Foreest are both grandmasters, and they've both been Dutch champions. They're brothers. And Machteld van Foreest was the women's Dutch champion in 2022. So this family is quite significant in the world of chess. And specifically, you know, they're kind of celebrities in the Netherlands, along with Anish Giri. A very strong group of chess players in the Netherlands. But Jorden van Foreest, Lucas van Foreest, Machteld van Foreest, their great-great-grandfather was Arnold van Foreest. And Arnold was a chess master in his own right. He became president of the Dutch Chess Federation, and he put together a simul for Capablanca. So Capablanca came to Amsterdam and played, I believe, 25 boards simultaneously. And it was stacked. There were strong players in the simul. This was not a simul versus amateurs. No, these were some of the best players in the area. And they were, you know, it was a profoundly strong bunch. And so Capablanca is going to take on all of them. And he'll make a move on a board, then move to the next board, make a move to the next board, make a move. Arnold is sitting on board 25. So, without further ado, let's take a look. So, Capablanca, let me get to the right spot, and hopefully this all works wonderfully today. Capablanca plays e4. So, again, controlling the d5 square. We saw Paul Morphy do this yesterday. Black plays e5. Controlling the d4 square. Knight f3, threatening e5, controlling e5. And yesterday, in the Paul Morphy game, we saw knight c6, and that's quite normal. But black could also play knight f6, and this is Petrov's defense, or the Russian game. So what's happening here? Well, black's saying, go ahead, take my pawn, white, if you want it. And oftentimes the most popular move is to do just that, and this is what Capablanca does. Now right here, the best move is to kick the knight back. The knight goes back, and then normally you take. And I believe this is what happens. d6, knight f3, and then knight takes e4. Now, some people like to, a rare continuation. I had one very talented student who loved it. D3, kicking the knight back. Knight C3 is quite exciting. It opens up lines for white. But by letting black's knight stay on E4 for a while, white intends to win tempi by attacking him later. So what's most popular here is just playing D4. Check my screen real fast. Oh, good. It's all good. Just playing D4, grabbing that center space. Now, a lot of times right here, black plays D5, and then bishop D3. And black could either play bishop E7 or bishop D6. And it's symmetrical. And a lot of, it's been studied a lot. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. But Arnold van Foreest doesn't play D5 right away. He plays bishop E7. Now it certainly could just transpose. Capablanca plays bishop D3, just like if it was the regular classical. And then here, if you wanted to, just transpose, you would play D5, right? But Arnold van Foreest plays knight F6. And I guess by abstaining from pushing this pawn forward, he's retaining a firm position. He's halfway controlling this square. It's solid. But a little bit constrained, right? He's a little more cramped. It's still solid, but it's cramped. Now let me show you what I was talking about just a second ago, which is right here, when the knight returns back and black takes, white plays D4. Black could play D5, and then bishop D3, and then either bishop E7 or bishop D6. If bishop D6 is 100% symmetrical. And, pieces are going to continue developing. At some point, white's probably going to play a C4 pawn break. Rooks are going to be in the E-file. The E-file is already open. It's the Petrov's defense. It's the Russian game. It's been studied a lot. That's the main line. But Arnold sidesteps the main line here. He doesn't have the D5 pawn in the center, but he has a nice solid position. So it's a little bit interesting. Capablanca goes ahead and castles, and so does Van Foreest. And then rook E1. So Capablanca is just playing it like a regular Petrov without the pawn on D5 so far. And now bishop G4, pinning the knight to the queen. Bishops like to be on long diagonals or pin knights to queens. Capablanca doesn't like the pin, apparently. I mean, he could have just developed knight B2, knight B to D2, but he puts the question to the bishop right away. H3. And Arnold backs up, keeping the pin. And in a moment, things are going to get a little fun. All right. So let me make sure, because I'm doing it from memory, and I don't want to make a mistake. I need to look at my notes. Kappa just plays C3 here. Okay, you'd probably end up with this anyways, considering that pawn never played to D5, so he's not playing the C4 pawn break. And this kind of resembles, like a regular queen pawn game. If the bishop went here and the knight went there, it would look very London, wouldn't it? Just like the London opening. You could just put the knight here, and then we have like the Collie system. It's just like a regular queen pawn game formation. Very comfortable play for white. Maybe there was more ambitious things he could have done. But he's in a simul, so he's just playing comfortable, good chess. H6, interesting. Not very necessary, but it is controlling the g5 square, which is an important square if white plans on launching an attack. I mean, he being Van Foreest, certainly could have done something like, you know, rook e8, and then try and provoke the c4 and then the c6 maybe. But, you know, challenge for the open file, the open e file. But he plays h6. That's interesting. And Van Foreest is no fish. So, after 2 slow pawn moves, Capablanca breaks the pin with g4. And now, this is where things get wild. Capablanca is legit the best player in the world at this point in time. Lasker is still world champion, but everybody knows Capablanca's, you know, better than more talented than Lasker. And 10 years later, he will finally get his chance to play Lasker and take the title from him. So Van Foreest, knowing that he's playing against the most talented player in the world, he attacks. And he uses a technique that isn't sound. It isn't 100% sound, but it's dangerous. When your opponent tries to break your pin like this, sometimes, if you're a coffee house player, if you like to play blitz chess, sometimes you can just play knight takes g4, then hx g4, and then bishop takes g4. You get 2 pawns for your knight, you still have the pin, and white's missing 2 pawns in the pawn shield. Against a lot of players who aren't yet experts, they'll have a hard time defending against a solid attack. Let's see what happens. So, Capablanca plays queen e2. This forms a battery in the e-file, the all-important e-file, only open file on the board, and is threatening to win the bishop on e7. Knight c6. Van Foreest develops a piece, adds the second defender. But Capablanca's not done yet. He put his queen here to threaten this, and now he goes up here threatening checkmate and the bishop. Well, Van Foreest considered this and plays f5. It defends both, and now is threatening the queen. This is starting to get quite exciting. Very, very exciting. Let's see. Queen d5, check. Steps out of danger and says check. King h8, of course. And now, maybe a lot of us would be thinking knight b to d2. But I think Capablanca was a little worried about this queen not having a lot of squares. And so he plays knight h2. And this opens up all these retreating possibilities, 2 of which can really be used to attack this king potentially. So he moves the f3 knight back to h2 to give this queen some useful scope backwards. And black plays bishop h4. Now bishop g5 would have certainly also been playable. But you know, maybe there's an interesting complication. Maybe I'll show you real fast. So if If bishop g5, then bishop takes g5. And then queen takes g5. And now this queen's in the same file as the king. Well, you can play knight takes g4. Now, instead of doing anything about this pinned knight right now, I think the smartest thing black can do is move a rook over. So you're still pinning the knight, but now you're threatening white's e-rook, right? So white needs to take care of that, trading rooks, and thus giving black potential to control the e-file. Queen takes g4, check. Queen can come back to g2. And then, yeah, you could just take here, but again, interesting complications. Queen d1. This rook is just sitting here for free, so you might as well block. Queen takes, and then queen f1, and then queen e7 again. It's interesting. Knight a3, maybe. This is what's in my notes. It was an interesting possibility. And I'm sure both players kind of looked at it in their mind's eye. But it seems fine for white. You do have the extra bishop. Yeah, black has a couple pawns, but you have an extra bishop, so I would definitely favor white here. All right, but back to where we are. White had played the nice knight h2, and then we see bishop h4, not g5, bishop h4. And this is also nice. The bishop doesn't have as much scope, but is threatening a check. All right. Now, Capablanca should have played something else here, and I'll show you that in a moment. He plays bishop f4, developing a piece, and this is good. Remember, he's playing like 25 boards in a stack simul, so he's not giving this game his full attention. It's still very early in the simul. Most of the other boards, if not all of them, are still happening. So what should he have played, maybe? Well, I really like this knight takes g4 idea. Because if f takes g4, then you have queen e4, which is resignable for black. Now, if knight takes g4, black doesn't have to take, of course. Could play bishop g5. Then you could play knight e3. You don't have to trade bishops. You like your long-range attacker. Bishop takes, and then you could bring your rook up the elevator. Now this rook could slide over and join the attack. And again, I would much prefer to be white in this position. You have a pawn in the center. You got a rook in the open file up the elevator. Your queen's active. Your bishops are dangerous. You're up 4 points in material. I'd much rather be white. But Capablanca didn't play knight takes g4. He didn't see it. And that's all right. We're all humans. Even Capablanca was a human. And especially a human playing 25 strong boards, you're going to miss some things. All right. So bishop f4. And then knight to e7. Now, this is a fair enough move by Van Foreest. It makes sense. But you need to analyze your checks, captures, and threats. There I go again with this advice. Because if you analyze your checks, captures, threats, you see bishop takes f2, king takes f2, king takes f2. There you go. Queen h4, check. bishop goes to g3, block, and then queen g5. And this seems pretty fun for black. Pretty fun for black. But Van Foreest missed. The bishop sack, plays knight e7. And now Capablanca makes a blunder. He missed a good move, but this move is just a blunder. He plays queen e6. Capablanca, rarely made blunders like this, but this is made possible partly by Van Foreest's aggressive play in a simul. And so this, in a way, is a good lesson for all of us. If any of you get the chance to play one of the most famous chess players, you get to play one of these super grandmasters that we follow online, watch their games, you get to play them in a simul. Play aggressively. Nobody is above mistakes. I don't like this move by Capablanca. Yes, it puts the rook and queen in the same file, but the queen's really lacking good squares to get away. And in fact, it can get trapped there. It can get trapped, and I'll show you that in a moment. But first, let me show you. He could have just played the queen g2. Remember, he moved the knight back to make this possible. That's what he should have done. That's what he should have done. All right. But he played queen e6, and what's the problem with queen e6? Well, it's not rook f6. That's what Van Foreest played. And then Capablanca can take this knight, right? It's okay. Van Foreest has an idea. It's not going to be a free knight. But there was something maybe better. And that maybe better was knight g6. I don't think he even considered it. Now, the bishop's under attack, so you can bring the queen back and defend the bishop. And why, might you say? Why not just take the knight? Well, if queen takes knight, then rook f6. And the queen has nowhere to go. That is a good trap. Considering Capablanca's previous mistake of queen e6, this is an excellent trap for a simul situation. Excellent trap. But like I said, he could have returned it to e3. But even if he plays queen e3, black's kind of taken the initiative. And let's see if I have anything else in my notes following the queen e3. And looks like I do. I say, bishop h5. And then white gets their knight out, unifying rooks. And black gets their queen out, unifying rooks. And if you think hard about which one you would rather be, you'd rather be black here. At least I would. I'd rather be black. Yes, white has control of the e-file for the moment. Okay. But this king is in peril, and we're starting to get a lot of dangerous ingredients set up for a nice attack. I would prefer to be black here. So Going back to our actual game. Queen e6, mistake by Capablanca. Rook f6, not as good as the knight g6. Because that is a wicked trap that if they don't fall for it, you still end up with a better position. But he played rook f6, and let's see what Capablanca does. Well, of course, he takes the knight. His queen's under attack, take the knight. And now, for the moment, he has 2 knights. Black has 0 for the moment. So it seems pretty okay for the moment. Trade of queens, even better when you're ahead material, right? And then rook to the 7th rank, even better. But look at this Van Foreest. He is no fish. He is very strong. He traded queens. He gave up this knight to set up this. A discovery. Discovered check. With, like, other possibilities of winning pieces back. I mean, this is impressive to me. So oh, and also, by the way, yeah. So it's this is even more impressive. Let's really look at this. This is beautiful. A discovery with a threat of a discovered check. A discovered attack with the threat of a discovered. Watch this. This is pretty. See? Bishop and rook on the same. Moves out of the way. Rook's under fire. And now when this moves out of the way, king's under fire. Beautiful stuff. This because he let Capablanca take that knight. That was a planned sacrifice that's quite beautiful. Let's see. So Capablanca brings his rook back to e3. This is good. It can help defend over here, but it's defending this, and it gets it out of danger, right? So it's a good move. And then discovered check. Bishop e2. He still plays the discovered check. Kappa blocks. Best way. And now, this bishop is under attack right now. Yes, we can push this in a moment and win a piece back. But let's remember this is under attack. So Van Foreest takes. Kappa takes back. And then he advances the pawn to threaten the pinned bishop. And that's going to win back a piece. Now Capablanca knows that after this goes here and this goes here, there's 2 attackers on that. So he moves his king up to give the pawn, after he loses the bishop, the second defender. We have f takes, and now, watch this. Final piece enters the game. Rook to e8. Threatening to come down here. Rook to the 7th rank. I know it's black, so it's the 2nd rank, but we still call it the 7th. It's a huge threat. Huge threat. And, look. These 2 haven't entered the game yet. Black is using all 3 of his pieces. White may have an extra piece, an extra minor piece, but he's not using it, and it's blocking his rook. So Van Foreest's attack is quite interesting, and is he still has good compensation for the material that he lost. All right, so you can't let this rook come here. That would be bad. So Kappa goes there, king f2. And then rook f8, check. Well, Kappa goes back to g2. And then Van Foreest goes rook e8. This is an important moment in the game. Not only is he threatening to put a rook in the 7th rank again, but Kappa has already shown that he wants to defend that by moving the king over here. If he does it again, we're repeating positions. Van Foreest could get a draw against Capablanca. Arnold Van Foreest could get the draw against Capablanca. Well, Capablanca's probably wandering around making his moves on the other board and thinking, and he decides to signal he's playing for the win. Well, Van Foreest takes the 7th. And here, Kappa isn't content letting this rook control the 7th. Again, it's in our terms, it's called the 2nd rank, but it's still moving the rook to the 7th, right? You don't, that's as good as a rook can get. Kappa doesn't like it, so he moves his rook back. Challenges it. So Arnold Van Foreest, look what he does. He just goes to the 3rd rank, and look, 1, 2, 3 attackers on the last shield. If you lose this pawn, your king has no safety shield, and these two are passed pawns. Van Foreest is an interesting player. Interesting player. This game, I haven't seen published anywhere. I discovered it a while back. And considering the Van Foreest family lineage in chess, I find it quite interesting. Quite interesting. Because, you know, all these years later, great-great-grandson of Arnold Van Foreest, who's playing Capablanca here, great-great-grandsons played Magnus Carlsen. So, you know, this top-level chess continues in this family for over 100 years. It's quite interesting. Okay, so, well, what to do? Uh-oh, we're going to lose that. But, you know, what's stopping us from just taking the bishop? So Capablanca does. It was in price, or for free. And then rook g takes. This is the way to do it, because it gives you extra coordination threats of checks against the king. And now you have these two passed pawns. Kappa immediately says fork. Van Foreest escapes fork with g5 check. I guess if you have no minor pieces left, like Van Foreest right now, you might as well use your pawns to continue the attack if that's, you know, if you want to continue the attack. Plus you're moving the passed pawns forward. King h5, rook h3 check, king goes to g6. Now this king is uncomfortable to black's position. Black's king can no longer leave the back rank. So rook e6 check, king f7, and then rook e1. Oh, this is annoying. It's threatening the knight, and it's pinning the other knight to the rook. This is annoying. So rook f2 defends the knight and also protects the king. Protects the king from a check. And that becomes important in a moment, because Van Foreest plays king h7. What's he thinking? Imagine if this rook's not here. That would be checkmate. That's what he's thinking. He only needs to remove one guard and he has checkmate. I mean, he could have also potentially thought about, you know, advancing this pawn, right? And we can take a look at it real fast. Might as well. If this goes here, then I'd probably move this out of the way. So there's one less thing for it to attack as it's moving forward. Plus, then you're defending this other knight. But here it comes. You could blockade it with the rook. And now it seems to be a little bit stuck, right? Well, I guess you could then make that opposition. Too bad the knight's covering this square and rooks can't jump, right? But still, knight f3 maybe, threatening the rook here. This could go up to e4, looks best maybe. But then it's not pinning the knight to the rook anymore, so this knight could come out. Could go here, defend this again. Rooks belong behind passed pawns. But now this rook, Capablanca's other rook, enters the game. Two attackers, two defenders. Say check. No reason not to. King e6. You could move, you know, in this direction, so maybe you can get another check. Maybe you can use a rook against a king and win a knight somehow. But this is going to go there. And now there's a third attacker. And that's a problem. Like I said, you can set up some other checks, but you're going to lose the passed pawn. So, as it turns out, advancing the passed pawn doesn't seem to work. So I think this was kind of a neat move. Other people might disagree, but I think it's kind of a neat move. It is a simul. If this rook goes someplace else, you have checkmate. Your rook is pinning the knight to the other rook. So I think I agree with Van Foreest here. I think it's a little hope chess, but he's against Capablanca, and he's got a objectively worse position. Capablanca does something quite interesting here. He plays knight h2, and this is Capablanca being quite creative. Quite creative. What do I mean by that? Well, before I explain why that move is so creative and why it works, I think a lesser creative idea would be knight f to d2 again. And then black could connect their rooks in the e file. And then knight f3, threatening a rook. But rook e7, check, king f6. Save the rook with a check. King f5. And then maybe rook e4, helping to eventually start moving those pawns forward. But you know, if I'm white, I don't even wait for that. I just play knight takes g5 right here. Because then after hx g5, you could get this knight into the game, which means your rook now has access over here. You get it into the game with the threat against the rook. Rook could go to e3. Again, moving out of harm's way, but then check. King goes to g7, and then battery. And we have to like white here. We have to like white. One of these passed pawns is gone. He's up to 2 points material, and we have to like white. So that would be what I would consider like the main idea. But there's a more fun one. There's the one that I would have played. And I checked it out to make sure it still works. Let me go back. Alright, so rook f2, king h7, and then we're on move 36. And this is where Capablanca plays his very creative knight h2. I just showed you what happens if knight goes to d2, right? But there's one really fun, I like crazy looking moves that are fun. And this one, and I almost played it out of order. I was so tempted to show it to you first, but I'm glad I didn't. Go ahead, take my rook is what we're saying. Go ahead, take my rook. Okay. Knight moves closer. Rook threatens it again. Other knight moves closer, defending. And now, what to do, black? I'd probably play something like a6 and, start, a safe move, but a little bit advancing over there. Knight f6, check. King h8. King g6. What are we doing? We're setting up a checkmate. What? How would a checkmate work? How would that work? Well, you take my knight, and I play rook h2. How do you stop checkmate? There's another checkmate. Down the h file. It can be delayed. You can delay it, but you can't stop it. You can delay it, but you can't stop it. Doesn't matter what they play. Checkmate. So that's the wild one that I would have played, because give up a rook, have a checkmate, big threat. But Capablanca played a move I don't think many people would play. This is a Capablanca move. Dude was very creative. Very, very creative. All right. So rook still goes to connect. Unify rooks down the open e file. Still an important file all these moves later. And now Capablanca does it. That's one way to unpin a knight, right? Knight d2. Wow. Okay. So Arnold van Foreest takes the rook. Knight g4. And this is going to win material. It's threatening this rook right here. Right? But why is it going to win material? Well, where should this thing go? Where should it go? Van Foreest thinks it should go down here. That's what he thought. And then Capablanca plays knight f3, threatening it again. And Van Foreest resigns. Why does he resign? Those of you in the chat, why would black resign here after this move? He put up such a good fight. Why is he resigning after this move? And while I'm waiting for an answer on that question, let me remind you, my name is Chris Torres. This is Daily Chess Musings. I am a highly esteemed chess teacher from Northern California. Daily Chess Musings started out as a little blog 17 years ago and has turned into a big, booming community. The Daily Chess Musings community exists on YouTube, on this channel. It exists on chess.com in the Daily Chess Musings Club. And its home base is, of course, dailychessmusings.com, where you find out about upcoming tournaments, free events. You can play tournaments against the other community members. You can read through the lessons. All my lessons are cataloged there. And So far, nobody's figured out why he resigns here. He knows he won't win, is what Boren's world. Yes, that's why, everybody resigns, right? They know they aren't going to win. All right. So, first of all, if you try and keep the rook in the e file, so that white's rook can't go in the e file, if you try and do that, you're going to get forked. So that's no good. Now, why is it bad if this rook leaves the e file? What happens if this rook leaves the e file? Anybody knows? I see a few people guessing in the chat. This is a little complicated. Capablanca was complicated with his knight h2, knight h4, and then the knight f3. This is his creative genius. He used a very complex and elegant technique to win this game. If this rook leaves the e file, let's say, it could, let's just say it goes to d1. Why not, right? Well, then we get our rook in the e file. So what's the big deal about that? What's the big deal about that? It means we're threatening knight f6, right? We're threatening knight f6. Check. And then where does the king have to go? To h8. And then we could play rook e8, checkmate, right? So yeah, they could delay this in this particular line. They could delay it a little bit. Doesn't matter. They could do anything they want here. They could do, let's see, anything, right? Right? Checkmate. Now, there's something else, though. Let's look at a couple other possibilities. All right, so what happens if this rook says go to rook g1? This is an interesting possibility. It's threatening the knight, right? Rook goes to g1. Well, then instead of putting your rook in the e file first, you simply play the knight f6, check first. Saves the knight, says check, should have the same effect. And now rook e2, and how do you stop checkmate? Well, again, you could do this, but then you're gonna have to move something. It doesn't matter what, and you get checkmated. Let's see if there's any other possibilities. So basically, if this rook leaves the e file, knight f6, king h8, rook e2, and then rook to e8 is checkmate. Anywhere, right? I think the knight f6 is probably the most elegant first move because it is a check. It's the most forcing. The first time I showed it to you, I did the rook e2, but I think knight f6 check's probably best. I mean, you could go here, again, knight f6 check. This goes here, and then you're threatening checkmate. And there's no escape. No escape. And so let's put the rook back here. I said if he goes to e4, well, you just have a fork. He can't go here. He can't go here. If he can't go to e4 because of the fork, he can't go here. So boom, 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 boom. He can't stay in the e file. Do you see the kind of finale that Capablanca created here? The rook needs to move out of the e file, but if he moves out of the e file, he loses. If he just does anything, he's gonna lose. There's nothing you can do. That you can slow it down. Again, you can slow it down because, see, this knight's here. You can slow it down. But now it's going to be your turn. Doesn't matter what you do, you get checkmated. It's beautiful. It is a beautiful finale. Something only a genius like Capablanca. Let me get the last, the continuation. Black gets their rooks coordinated. He says, take my rook. Then he gets this knight on g4. Remember, this knight on g4 is important. It's going to be the one to say check from f6. Then he puts the knight on f3. Knight on f3 is important. It means that if they're willing to give up a rook, it still doesn't stop the checkmate, because there'll be two pieces controlling e1 when we get the rook to move. And then if the rook moves anywhere, doesn't matter. Check. And then again, because this knight is here, the best they can do is delay the checkmate. That's the best they can do. Otherwise this finishes it out. Incredible chess game. Absolutely breathtaking. And I think this might be just like an exclusive for this channel. I haven't seen that anybody else has looked at this game, and it's of historical interest because it is a Van Foreest. Let's take a quick look, go through the main points again. Petrov's defense, we talked about. Black doesn't play d5, we talked about. That's interesting. Rook goes to the e-file pin, question to the bishop. And then here comes kind of the attack that I use this against students or in speed chess games a lot. You give up a knight for 2 pawns and a pin. Is it sound? Most usually not. Is it fun? Does it give you a good attack? Most usually yes. Did we learn something? Van Foreest gave a very tough game to Capablanca because he didn't sit there scared, he attacked. All right, so Capablanca threatens a bishop, defends, threatens checkmate and a bishop, defends, moves to d5, says check, king moves to the corner, knight h2. And this was key because it opens up this possibility, or this possibility, which Capablanca should have used. But after bishop h4, bishop f4, knight e7, when the queen's attacked, it should come back here. Most definitely. Capablanca went up, and it could get trapped in here. Rook f6, slightly out of turn. The neater move was this, and then if Kappa takes, trap. It's a really pretty trap, right? And there's no reason not to throw it in. You're improving the knight along the way. But rook f6 was played. Knight's given up, and this is pretty too, by the way. So Van Foreest's move is pretty. It's beautiful. Rook f6 says, take my knight, Kappa. He does. And then trades queens, down material, but discovered attack with the threat of a discovered check. Incredible attacking skill that Van Foreest used here. He gave Capablanca a really challenging game. Really challenging. This is not easy. This whole game was quite difficult. But we get to see Capablanca raise to the occasion. Stepping up with the hope, if this moves, checkmate. Knight h2, Capablanca, original chess play. He has an idea. Go ahead, take my rook, he says. I threaten you. I threaten you again. And no matter where you go, you're gonna lose. No matter where you go, you're gonna lose. Wow. Incredible game. I am so honored to share that game with you guys. Let me get back to my regular screen here. There we go. I am so honored to be able to share that level of brilliant play with you guys. I'm very passionate about that game. I hope that came through in the lesson. I like to calmly comb through ideas in a calm manner, but I am very passionate about Capablanca. So my three favorite chess players of all time are Capablanca, Paul Morphy, and Bobby Fischer. Those are my three favorite chess players of all time. And I have spent a lot of time deciphering their ideas, playing through, trying to understand. Like I said, that's arduous. You can always have your parent or your friend, your spouse, you can have somebody play the opposition, play the Van Foreest moves, and you try and guess Capablanca's moves. Play Guess the Moves with Paul Morphy. It's a good place to start. Play Guess the Moves with Capablanca after you've gone through a fair number of Morphy games. And then play Guess the Move with Bobby Fischer. And you will start inheriting through study their style and their creativity and their techniques. It'll start bleeding through into your own games, and you'll be incredibly strong. I hope everybody had a great time today during this lesson and throughout the camp. Once again, my name is Chris Torres. This is Daily Chess Musings YouTube channel. Go ahead and hit the like and subscribe buttons. And I will see you guys tomorrow. So long.